I'm 52, a small business owner, and a father. My business isn't glamorous, construction supplies, but it's mine. I built it from nothing, poured in sweat, sleepless nights, and years of hard work to make it what it is today. Stable, successful, and respected in our community. I also have a family. My wife and I married when I was 40. She had a daughter from a previous relationship, who I'll call S, who was 9 when we met. I raised her like my own, or so I thought. Everything unraveled 3 months ago when S, now 24, announced she was getting married. I was happy for her, at least at first. She'd met her fiancé, D, a year ago. I didn't know him well, but he seemed polite if a bit flashy. My first clue something was wrong came during an impromptu family dinner. S and D were discussing wedding plans, and when I casually asked about the budget, S hesitated. About $250,000, she said, looking directly at me. I nearly choked on my drink. That's ambitious. Who's footing the bill? Her expression hardened. You are. I'll admit I laughed. Not out of cruelty, but disbelief. She couldn't be serious. But as I glanced at my wife, I realized she wasn't laughing. Wait, you're serious? I asked, still trying to process. S rolled her eyes, as if I was being unreasonable. You own a business. You're well off. You can afford it. And what exactly makes you think I should? I shot back, keeping my tone as calm as possible. Her tone turned sharp. You're my father. This is what parents do. I glanced at my wife, hoping for backup, but she looked away. That silence hit me harder than anything S could have said. My wife knew about this demand, probably supported it. Betrayal bubbled under my skin, but I held it together. I'm sorry, S, I said firmly. I'm not selling my business or dipping into my savings for a wedding. I'll contribute something reasonable. But this? No. Her face turned red. You're unbelievable. You raised me. And now you're acting like I'm not your daughter. The conversation spiraled from there. S accused me of being selfish, unloving, and cheap. D chimed in, calling me old-fashioned and implying I wasn't a real man if I couldn't provide for my family. I asked them to leave before I said something I'd regret. The fallout was immediate. S refused to speak to me. My wife became distant, barely acknowledging me around the house. I tried to reason with her, but she defended S, saying I was too harsh and should reconsider. She's our daughter, she said one night. This is her dream wedding. Don't you want her to be happy? Not at the cost of my livelihood, I snapped. She's acting entitled, and you're enabling her. That argument ended in silence. I slept on the couch. Over the next few weeks, S's behavior escalated. She posted on social media about how I was abandoning her. Mutual friends and even distant relatives started reaching out, accusing me of being a bad father. One day, I arrived at my office to find a protest sign taped to the door. Deadbeat dad. I knew S was behind it. I decided enough was enough. I hired a private investigator. I hadn't wanted to go this route, but the attacks on my reputation and business were too much. What I found shocked me. S and D weren't just planning an extravagant wedding. They had already booked a luxury venue, hired celebrity-level vendors, and even ordered custom diamond-studded wedding favors. The bills were piling up, and they were desperate for someone to bail them out. Even worse, D had a history of failed business ventures and lawsuits, all for scams involving wealthy in-laws. I felt sick. This wasn't just entitlement, it was a calculated scheme. I confronted my wife that night, laying out everything. She broke down, admitting she knew some of it but didn't want to believe it. When I asked if she had been giving S money behind my back, she hesitated just long enough for me to get my answer. I filed for divorce the next day. S didn't take kindly to my retaliation. When she learned about the divorce, she went nuclear. She started spreading rumors that I had cheated on my wife, abused her, and even suggested I had illegal dealings in my business. She threatened lawsuits and even showed up at my office with D, demanding I do the right thing and pay for the wedding. I didn't flinch. I had already hired a lawyer. Every accusation they hurled was met with cold, hard evidence disproving their lies. When S filed a frivolous lawsuit claiming emotional distress, it was thrown out immediately. But I wasn't done. I decided to hit them where it hurt. My lawyer helped me draft a cease and desist letter for the defamation and harassment. At the same time, I tipped off D's former victims about his current antics. Within weeks, lawsuits started piling up against him. His flashy lifestyle crumbled under the weight of legal fees and debt collectors. As for S, I cut her off completely. No financial support, no trust fund, nothing. She tried to rally family members against me, but when I shared the evidence of her and D's schemes, most sided with me. The few who didn't, I blocked them. By the time S's wedding day arrived, it was a shadow of the extravaganza she'd planned. They ended up having a courthouse ceremony with no guests. I wish I could say it brought me joy, but it didn't. It just felt necessary. My wife and I finalized our divorce a month later. She moved in with S, and I haven't heard from either of them since. Do I regret it? No. Sometimes, standing your ground means losing people you love. But at least I still have my business, my integrity, and my peace of mind. After the dust settled, I had to reevaluate everything. My life, my priorities, my sense of trust, everything had been upended by the people I thought I could rely on. The house felt emptier, quieter. At first, it was disorienting. I'd catch myself expecting to hear my wife humming in the kitchen, or S barging in to complain about something trivial. But it never happened. It wasn't the loneliness that got to me. It was the realization that I'd spent so many years ignoring red flags. Looking back, S had always shown signs of entitlement. The way she'd demand the newest gadgets or insist on having her way during family trips. I'd chalked it up to teenage behavior, never realizing it was a deeper issue. My wife had always enabled her, brushing off S's tantrums or siding with her in arguments, but I'd let it slide for the sake of peace. Now, that peace was gone, and in its place was clarity. 3 weeks after the wedding fiasco, I received an email from S. The subject line was simple: "We need to talk." Against my better judgment, I opened it. The message was a masterpiece of manipulation. She started by playing the victim, claiming that my decision had ruined her life and strained her marriage. She said D was struggling to find work because of the lawsuits I'd allegedly orchestrated against him. Then came the kicker. She wanted me to rebuild our relationship by helping them get back on their feet. Specifically, she asked for $50,000 to help pay off their debts and start fresh. I laughed out loud, not out of humor, but sheer disbelief. After everything she'd done, she still thought I owed her something. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the email to my lawyer just in case this was the prelude to another legal stunt. A few days later, D showed up at my office unannounced. He was a shadow of the cocky man who had stood in my home demanding money just months earlier. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a wrinkled shirt. His demeanor was desperate, almost pitiful. "I just need 5 minutes," he said, holding up his hands like he was surrendering. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "You've got two." He launched into a sob story about how he'd been misunderstood and unfairly targeted. He claimed that S had exaggerated things, that he'd only ever wanted to give her the life she deserved. Then, as if it was the most logical conclusion in the world, he asked if I'd consider hiring him at my company. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "You must be joking," I said, standing up. "After everything you've pulled? Get out of my office." "But out." My voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. He hesitated for a moment, then slunk away, muttering under his breath. I thought that was the end of it, but S had one more trick up her sleeve. A few weeks later, I discovered she'd tried to take out a loan using my name as a guarantor. Thankfully, the bank flagged it immediately and called me to verify. I was livid. This wasn't just entitlement, it was outright fraud. I filed a police report. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it was the only way to protect myself. The investigation revealed that S and D had been trying similar stunts with other family members, forging signatures and making false promises to secure loans. This time, though, they couldn't talk their way out of it. S was arrested for attempted fraud, and D was implicated as an accomplice. They both faced charges. Watching them in court was surreal. S looked at me with a mixture of anger and betrayal, as if I was the villain in her story. D, on the other hand, looked defeated, barely meeting my gaze. The judge didn't go easy on them. S received probation and mandatory financial counseling, while D got a short jail sentence for his repeated offenses. It wasn't the harshest punishment, but it was enough to send a message. Actions have consequences. After the trial, I received a letter from S. She didn't apologize. Instead, she blamed me for everything, claiming I'd ruined her life and turned her into a criminal. I didn't respond. There was no point. I'd already made my peace with the fact that our relationship was beyond repair. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I expanded my business, reconnecting with old clients and investing in new projects. I even started mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing my story to help them avoid the pitfalls of mixing family and business. As for my personal life, I learned to find joy in the little things. Weekend fishing trips, quiet evenings with a good book, and the company of friends who stood by me through everything. It wasn't the life I'd envisioned, but it was mine, and it was good. S and D became cautionary tales in our community. Their fall from grace was a hot topic for months, a reminder of what happens when entitlement goes unchecked. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that standing your ground isn't easy, especially when it involves people you care about. But sometimes, it's the only way to protect yourself and what you've built. Entitlement is a dangerous thing, and enabling it only makes it worse. So if you're ever faced with a choice between your principles and someone else's demands, choose your principles. You might lose some people along the way, but you'll gain something far more valuable: self-respect. And if you enjoyed this wild ride of family drama, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Who knows? Next time, I might share the story about how my neighbor tried to steal my driveway. Stay tuned.